So good morning. Thank you so much for having me back here at Heartland. And thank you so much for gracing me with this beautiful music this morning. And much thank you to the tech team as well. So I'm going to start off dating myself a little bit. Once upon a time, decades ago, video was still a pretty new thing on the internet. And like if you wanted to watch a video on your 56.6 modem or whatever it was, you had to really want it. And I remember back in the day when I was in grad school, there was a video that was making its way around the internet, like a grainy black and white video of a crow that was trying to get something that it wanted out of a bottle. Maybe you've seen it. I don't remember what the object was, but the crow had tried and failed repeatedly to retrieve this object with its beak, and not for no reason. The bottle had been designed by scientists so that the bird's head would not fit all the way down there in the bottom. And those same scientists were filming the crow in its futile efforts over and over again to reach the object, which seems like kind of a mean trick, but there you have it. But the crow in response took a wire and carefully bent it into a hook shape and then fished the object out of the bottle and took off with it. The whole video was maybe 50 seconds long, and it blew my mind when I saw it, like blew my mind. A bird blatantly using tools to get what it wanted. Tools. Take that, scientists. Because I went to school back in the day when learned books still said that humans were defined as the animal that uses tools, defined by it. And birds were still considered canonically unintelligent animals, hence the insult bird brain. And so here was a bird of all things using tools, actually engineering tools, to problem solve. And I was astounded, which shows you how ignorant I was, because of course we now know that birds are wicked smart in general, and crows can do all kinds of amazing things. Crows can recognize faces. They can count to 6 or higher. And yes, they use tools to problem solve all the time. If you go on YouTube now, you can find videos of Caledonia crows shaping and using hooks. You can see them dropping pebbles into glasses of water to float objects up to the top. You can see a 2-minute video of a crow tearing a piece of paper into just the right shape to activate a vending machine. And I'm thinking back to my own experiences before debit cards of like trying to smooth out that crumpled dollar bill for the Pepsi machine, right? The crow was way ahead of me, way ahead of me. So for a long time, scientists were skeptical that animals had conscious experience, basic sentience, let alone self-awareness or more sophisticated cognition. But now increasingly, science is demonstrating that animals are much more intelligent than we thought, much more aware than we had supposed. Take the mirror test, for example. In 2005, Happy, an elephant who lives in the Bronx Zoo, became the first elephant to pass the mirror test. And what that means is, it means scientists drew an X, a big white X on Happy's forehead, and then showed Happy herself in a mirror. And when Happy saw the image of herself and saw the X, she began repeatedly touching the white X on herself, right? Not the mirror, but she starts exploring herself. And this indicates that she understood that the elephant in the mirror was herself. Happy thus joined a small, idiosyncratic, but growing list of animals who passed the mirror test, including chimpanzees, dolphins, and possibly 2 magpies. What does this mean? If an animal recognizes itself, does it mean that it possesses self-awareness? We don't know. Or let's talk about octopuses, the current reigning favorite intelligent animal, who's become famous for its complicated mind due to documentaries like My Octopus Teacher. In the book, Other Minds, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness, author Peter Godfrey Smith explains that what makes octopuses, octopodes, so interesting to study in captivity is not their problem-solving ability or their other measures of intelligence. They do okay, but the author admits they are no Einsteins. What makes them so interesting to study is their individual capriciousness and their level of awareness. So one student of octopuses put it this way: when you work with fish, they have no idea they are in a tank. But with octopuses, it is completely different. They know that they are inside this special place and that you are outside of it, and all of their behaviors are affected by their awareness of their own captivity. And so octopuses mess with their experimenters. They recognize them. They play favorites. They squirt water down the backs of the ones that they don't like. They blow out the lights in the tank by squirting jets of water at them. They plug up the outflow valves with their arms so the tanks will overflow and mess up the lab. One octopus waited until it had its trainer's undivided attention and then made a very dramatic show of throwing away uneaten a food item that it did not like. In general, they are masters at waiting until their captor is distracted and then busting out of confinement and crawling away across the floor. They've even been observed at play, jetting pieces of plastic back and forth just for the heck of it, apparently. So for much of history, animals were and are instruments. They're tools, investments, the food we eat, sometimes work partners. And even if there are laws around how animals can and can't be treated, they're still understood as a category of property. But the more we understand the richness, the depth, and the complexity of animal awareness, the more surely we must rethink or reimagine that relationship, right? Problem solving, anticipating others, perceiving the self, playing favorites, playing around. These are sophisticated cognitive acts. What does that mean for animal experience or animal awareness? What is it like to be a crow or a dolphin or an octopus? I mean, from the inside. What is the experience of their inner world? Do they have one? Should it matter? Whatever animal experience is like, it is certainly very different from human experience, right? Indeed, it's important to allow animals their own idiosyncratic animalness. Crows don't need to be like humans to be worthy of respect as a part of the interdependent web of life. A rat does not need to exclaim, "Oh, woe is me," for its suffering to count as suffering, right? A soliloquy is not a prerequisite for compassion. And animals should not need to be persons for humans to treat them with humanity. But when we encounter intelligence and awareness and sensitivity in another being, does it not touch something inside of us that calls us to a different kind of relationship? And so environmental scientist Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is also a member of the Potawatomi Nation, writes, in the Western tradition, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings with, of course, humans on top, the pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants at the bottom. But she says in the native ways of knowing, humans are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. She says, we say that humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn and must look for teachers among the other species for guidance because their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live and they teach us by example. She says they've been on the earth far longer than we have and they've had time to figure things out. And our older siblings of creation are not just found in the animal kingdom. And Kimmerer would say neither is wisdom and ways of knowing. Indeed, when we are willing to recognize it, awareness, intelligence, responsiveness, even wisdom seems to be almost omnipresent in the natural world, even in the most unlikely of places. So let's talk about slime molds for a second. Okay. One of the great things about being a Unitarian Universalist minister is that when one of your congregants sees an article with a title like, "Can Slime Molds Think?" they just know instinctively to send it to you, right? So this is an article by Nancy Catherine Wilecki in the November-December issue of Harvard Magazine, "Can Slime Molds Think?" So slime molds are single-celled creatures, a type of amoeba. They can actually grow quite large for only having one cell, 30 centimeters. They are gross. Forgive my Homo sapiens prejudice, but if the conjunction of the words slime and mold don't adequately convey the grossness of this creature, I don't know, I think I can do any better. They don't have brains and they don't have sensory organs, but despite that, they are aware of their surroundings through a process scientists call mechanosensation, which is a kind of perceiving through interpreting vibrations. And they use this ability to recognize food and to move around. And they're actually pretty clever about navigating their environment. They can go through mazes, for example, to find food. So in this new study, slime molds are seen making decisions. Scientists discovered that if they put a slime mold in the center of a petri dish, and they put a disk of food, a single disk of food on one side, and 3 disks of food on the other side, the slime mold will, after an initial period of exploration time, grow towards the better side, the larger mass of food, 70% of the time. And it doesn't do this by like connecting to both sides with its little tendrils and then sort of following along to the greater side. It somehow perceives the masses first before it does anything, decides which way it is going to go, and then it commits to that decision and goes off to the one side. And scientists have no idea as of yet how it does this. Michael Levin, one of the authors of the Harvard slime mold experiment, said the slime mold has a completely alien body type with a very different way of living in the world. And yet we humans share something with it, which is the ability to map out the world we live in, make decisions, and try to do what we like. And slime molds are not animals or plants. They're protists, which is a different kingdom. They don't have brains or nervous systems, but they sense, they take in decisions, they make decisions, they act. And we humans as animals are naturally prejudiced to think of intelligence as something that happens in brains. We're prejudiced to think of intelligence as something that is accompanied by a train of thought, a soliloquy. But other organisms exhibit intelligence in ways that we don't always see and appreciate and name for what it is. And sometimes we miss intelligence because it's happening at the wrong speed. Right? We're used to intelligence happening at animal speed, which is the speed of like running and ducking and darting after prey. But a new generation of plant biologists argue that plants are also incredibly intelligent, just at a different time scale. In a 2013 article in the New Yorker called The Intelligent Plant, author Michael Pollan summarizes this view. It is only human arrogance and the fact that the lives of plants unfold in what amounts to a much slower dimension of time that keeps us from appreciating their intelligence. Biologist Stephen Mancuso points out that we use the metaphor of plants to indicate that which is senseless and non-responsive, right? We talk about being in a vegetative state, and yet plants are exquisitely aware of and responsive to their surroundings. Plants have between 15 and 20 senses to our 5, and they have all of our senses and then many more besides. Plants can learn from and remember their experiences. A mimosa plant, the kind that like curls up its leaves when at a touch, they can learn that drops of water are harmless and retain that knowledge for months, and then they don't waste their time curling up. Plants can apprehend. A researcher recently found that if she played the recording sound of a caterpillar chomping on a leaf in the presence of a certain species of plant, the plant would release chemical defenses to prime itself for the coming attack. In another experiment, a species of plant sent roots out toward the sound of water rushing through pipes, even though the pipes themselves were dry. Darwin himself thought that the roots of plants might be analogous to brains. He described plants as upside-down animals with the brain below the surface and the body above. And meanwhile, in that above world, plants create a bewildering variety of chemicals, hundreds of chemicals to respond to their environment. Plants use chemicals to attract friendly pollinators. They use chemicals to defend themselves. One species of plant, when attacked by caterpillars, will release a chemical that summons another species of wasp to kill the caterpillars. Another species, when overgrazed by animals, will change its chemical composition so that its leaves become toxic to the grazing animal. They do these things without brains, without nervous systems. And the question, says Michael Pollan, is whether behaviors observed in plants, which look very much like learning, memory, decision-making, and intelligence, deserve to be called by those terms, or whether those words should be reserved exclusively for creatures with brains. And to this list of attributes, we now know we can add communication, cooperation, and kin care. Because we now know from the work of Susan Simard and others that trees communicate and cooperate with each other in quite complex ways. Dr. Simard describes this process in a 2016 TED Talk called How Trees Talk to Each Other. And Darwin would not be at all surprised to learn that this communication happens underground, right? The root systems of trees, it turns out, are connected underground to each other by fiber networks of fungal threads that are called mycorrhiza, which arise from a symbiotic relationship between the tree and the fungus. The fungi get nutrients from the roots of the trees, and in return, the trees use these fungal networks to send carbon and water and nutrients and information to other trees. This allows trees to engage in reciprocal trade with one another, even across species. One species of tree will send its excess carbon to another tree in need, and then when that tree is the one with the excess carbon, it sends it back. They support each other. And this is not done unintelligently. Samar discovered that this underground network allows trees to engage in supportive parenting. So-called mother trees can actually recognize their own offspring in the forest and preferentially send those trees food, nutrients, even chemical warnings of impending insect attacks. And when a mother tree is injured, it sends its offspring information to help them prepare to survive her absence. And Samar showed that trees that are wired into these mother tree hubs have better survival rates than trees that are isolated. And these connections we now know are omnipresent below the forest floor. A signal tree has its network of connections. Each of those trees have their network of connections, and ultimately the whole forest is wired together as this densely connected network of branches and hubs. And all along this network, there is this constant interchange of resources and information. Some have called it the wood wide web. And this connectedness allows the forest to be more resilient, responsive, adaptive, intelligent. So again, we have to look past our human prejudice, just focusing on individual organisms, and miss the behavior of the larger system. The individual trees are intelligent and the connected forest is wise. Dr. Teresa Ryan, a PhD in resource management and environmental studies at the University of British Columbia, who is also an indigenous person, a member of the Gitlin tribe of the Tsimshian Nation, says that her research in forest ecosystems is motivated by her Aboriginal Tsimshian heritage and the guidance provided by her grandfather. Our worldview, she says, is that we are part of these ecosystems, that we are all connected together, that we can't be separated from each other, and that collaboration is all a part of it. She concludes the world is an entwined place. The world is an entwined place. And the entwinement of the world is, of course, a fundamental Unitarian Universalist principle, right? Unitarian Universalism is in many respects a religion about relationship. And our seventh principle counsels us respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. But how does our understanding of our part in that web, our relationship to the whole, change if that interdependent web of existence is also a web of awareness, a web of intelligence? How does that part change if we understand ourselves to be embedded in, surrounded by, sustained by systems of ancient intelligence, ancient wisdom, ancient ways of knowing that rival our own? And so in a 2015 article in Yes magazine, Robin Wall Kimmerer argues we need a new pronoun to fundamentally reorient ourselves in our relationship to nature. The article is called Nature Needs a New Pronoun. And Kimmerer says that in her native language of Anishinaabe, which was erased from her family in the boarding schools and which she is now relearning, in her language, it is impossible to speak of a living thing as an it. In Anishinaabe and many other indigenous languages, she says, we use the same words to address all living beings as we do our family, because we are family. And Kimmerer asks us to consider replacing the pronoun it, when used in relation to beings in the natural world, with the pronoun ki, K-I, ki, which is a much shortened form of an Anishinaabe word, bimadaziaki. And the plural of this word she suggests would be kin, kin. So imagine if embedded in our language itself was the idea that nature was our kin. How different would our world be? Would our oceans be dying? Would our forests be disappearing? Would the mass extinction of non-human species be an unrecognized, uncontested, unchallenged reality of the modern world as it is today? How differently would we orient ourselves to the world if we saw it as kin? Each person, Kimmerer says, human or no, is bound to every other in a reciprocal relationship. Just as all beings have a duty to me, I have a duty to them. And an integral part of humans' education, she says, is to know these duties and how to perform them. And there is, in fact, a rich tradition in the West of mutual obligation, respect, and concern for people, however imperfectly we live it out. We're counseled to honor our parents, to welcome the stranger, to treat guests with respect, to care for our neighbor. What if we extended this ethic of care to all of our kin? Then we might say, in the words of the Kiowa poet Mama Day, you see, I'm alive. I'm alive. I stand in good relation to the earth. I stand in good relation to the gods. I stand in good relation to all that is beautiful. You see, I am alive. I am alive. May it be so someday, and amen.